Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Welcome into the GSMC Football Podcast right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Brice Lewis. Obviously, we have another great football show for you today. Obviously, we're going to continue our season reviews in football. More of the NFC teams, 5 more today listed on the show. Also, obviously, we started these shows off with giving y'all just some news. Obviously, not a lot of news, barely any news, but some news around in the podcast. And we're gonna go from there. You know, we're gonna go from there, and we're gonna take it one day at a time. Obviously, like I said, we're still going through the pandemic. Don't know where we're gonna get sports again. Rumors coming out that we might lose the football seasons this year. We hope we don't. We really hope we don't. But these things are somewhat foreseeable sometimes. So we just got to put ourselves in the best position to make sure we can do our best to stay clean, stay healthy, and try to get through this trying time in a lot of people's lives in America and around the entire world too. So we're just going to go on, and now we're going to focus on some football. So, some news around the league. So Tua has came out and said he is 100%. He is ready to go, and he could play right now if needed. He could start right now if needed. Obviously, this is news because one thing on Tua that has been scaring teams, or some people feel like he would be the definitive number 2 or definitive number 1 quarterback in this draft, was the hip injury that he suffered at Alabama. And obviously that was a very serious hip injury. Now he has gotten surgery and he's recovered from it, but some people are still concerned and still a little worried about if he is ready to go, if he's still in a good place, can he go? I think a lot of people are concerned about, is he even healthy enough to play? Well, Tua's coming out and saying he's healthy enough to play. He's saying that he's ready to go, and if you need him to play, he'll play. And, you know, obviously that's big because, again, whoever drafts him, you know, obviously with the coronavirus affecting training camps and mini camps and all the times they may have times to learn, there's still a strong possibility he will not start just because of that. But also, you know, I think it would make you feel better as a team, because if you had to go ahead and start him for whatever reason, it's not like health-wise he's a liability. Some people feel like even with the scans and him saying he's 100%, some people are still concerned. Some people are still worried. Some people aren't sure if they are to believe this information. And I think that's something that you really can't see, because obviously you can't have these in-person workouts with these teams. Obviously, you've been hearing it with certain draft interviews. Players have been on FaceTime with certain teams trying to communicate, trying to talk to them, give them pre-draft interviews. The draft is this month, so obviously they're only a few weeks away from that. So that's obviously something that you know, you gotta look into. But you know, obviously, like I said, Tua feels like that he could go if needed. And I'm sure any team who wants to draft him is going to be very happy. Obviously, main teams we know that are involved, we think, are really as a 2-man race, we think, is the Miami Dolphins and the San Diego Chargers. Obviously, you hear many rumors about maybe people like Herbert more, somebody like Jordan Love more, but people feel like the definitive guy that those two teams are going to go after are Tua. And if they couldn't get to it, then Justin Herbert or Jordan Love would be the backup plan. And, you know, it's funny because I've heard certain sports announcers and casters say Tua's kind of like a guy where he's either you're getting a legend or you're finding a new GM. Like he is either a Hall of Fame guy or he's just a bust that got lost you a job. And, you know, obviously with the injury concern and everything that surrounds him, obviously that is something that will keep people on their P's and Q's somewhat concerned because they want to make sure that they're not making an investment into someone who can't play. They want to make sure they're making an investment into someone that's not going to hold them back and will still help them contribute to being better in the future and being more successful in the future going forward. So I think obviously that's going to be the big deal here. That's going to be what people are going to be looking for with Tua. And, like I said, hopefully he says he's healthy and everything is going to go well. Everything is going to go well. And we're going to have to go from there. So, like I said, he said he's 100% healthy. So I'm sure if teams believe him, you best believe he will be the number 2 quarterback taken off this year's draft. In other news, Aldon Smith, I don't know if you remember that name, Aldon Smith, pass rusher, who was suspended by the league for, I believe, I don't 100% believe, I think it was for some type of police case, maybe violence was involved, I believe. I don't think it was drug related. I think it was an abusive case. Has just signed with the Dallas Cowboys. Now, obviously, pending review by the league will allow him to know if he's reinstated, but he has signed with the Cowboys for a 1-year deal worth about $4 to $5 million. Obviously, the Cowboys are looking for pass rushing help. Aldon Smith, when he has played, has been considered one of the better pass rushers in the game. They think he's always had the talent to be an elite pass rusher. It's just obviously his off the field issues have kept him from being able to be consistently on the field and maybe even having a consistent game. And so, we've seen the flashes. And 2012, he was a Pro Bowl selection. He last played in the league with Raiders in 2015. He was given a year-long suspension for violating substance abuse policy following a hit-and-run accident and drunk driving. So, all that really piled up. Remember, this man has played since 2015, so it's been 5 years. We don't know what type of shape he's in. We don't know where he is in his career. But, obviously this is a guy the Dallas Cowboys feel like can play for them, contribute, give them something that works. But, it's going to be very important for him going forward. Obviously, the Cowboys still trying to make additions to their team to remain competitive. But, it'll be interesting to see if Aldon Smith gets back on the field to see what he looks like. Can he maybe be a steal for the Dallas Cowboys and get them another elite pass rusher besides DeMarcus Lawrence and Powell's to put them in a good position to be successful moving in long term? And in other news, Antonio Brown signing. Also, Lamar Jackson signing. And Marquise Brown signing. They all took a picture as they have been shown working out together. It's funny because every time I see comments, people love to point out, why are they still working out together? Aren't we supposed to be social distancing? I mean, if you've seen the Jameis Winston workout videos, I think they're absolutely hilarious because Jameis Winston's just a funny character. But, you got all these trainers around. I mean, listen, these players still got to keep themselves in shape and keep themselves sharp, even through the social distancing. So I understand why they're doing this. But they worked out together, and that started a firestorm on Twitter because now people were wondering, AB to Ravens? Should the Ravens sign AB? Some people say it's a good fit. Some people say it's a bad fit. If the Ravens were able to pick up AB and AB was able to stay out of trouble, of course this would be a great signing because AB is, if he's still that receiver, could still be one of the best receivers in the NFL. And then you add him with Hollywood Brown. Now the bar has a true number 1 in Antonio Brown. Then you got Hollywood who can go over the top. You still have 2 tight ends you can get to, and you still have running backs. This offense that was so great last year just became even greater this year. But obviously, we know the downfalls if they do sign. What if he gets into trouble? What if he ruins chemistry? What if he complains if he doesn't get the ball? What if he messes up things? Antonio Brown, some people may feel like is the new 2010s, 2020s T.O. I'm sure that's how some people view him. And that's interesting to me, if they do view him that way. Because that may be how some people view Antonio Brown. Obviously, I mean, you can make a decision for yourself. Should he be on the Ravens? Should the Ravens entertain the thought All of those are questions, and we'll have to see. Obviously, even though he's had his issues, it's not like he hates everybody in the league. And there's still obviously people who are still cool with him. Because at the end of the day, they may look at it as just a business thing. He's still a great football player. Why wouldn't I want to work out with a great football player? And that's just what it is. So that's pretty much all the news and updates so far in the league that I feel like is relevant at this moment. But now we're going to get to the season reviews. And next segment, we're going to get into a team that I consider the wild card of the NFC next year and in the entire league, the Arizona Cardinals, right here on the podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. So, last segment, we talked about just some news and notes from the league. Tua saying that he's 100%. He's ready to go. He's ready to play football. He can play if he needed to right at this very moment. Tua says he is good to go, and obviously, if he truly is good to go, teams that want to draft him will very, very much be much more happier, can sleep easier at night knowing that this guy is ready to go if they need to draft him. Also, we talked about the Cowboys signing Aldon Smith. Has not played in the league since 2015 after a myriad of off-the-field issues. Now, they have signed him to a 1-year, 4-year deal, and they think that he's ready to go. And we'll be interested to see him having such a long layoff since playing in a season, since he was with the Raiders back in 2015. And then lastly, we also talked about the picture that Antonio Brown, Hollywood Brown, and Lamar Jackson took all together. People starting speculations, could Antonio Brown end to Baltimore? Do you like it? Do you not like it? We'll have to see. But now we're going to get to our season reviews. So, this is what's going on. Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, their season review. Now, coming into this season, Arizona had holes. No one expected Arizona would. Nobody thinks Arizona was going to be good or a surprise team. Obviously, offensive line was a shambles. Defensively, they weren't that good either. Their strength of their team was what you would expect a guy, new head coach Cliff Kingsbury, coming up from Texas Tech last year, would be passing the ball. Cliff Kingsbury has always had an explosive offense. If that's what the Cardinals were, they were explosive offense. They were an offense that they're running basically his Texas Tech offense here in the NFL. Obviously, people have questions. Could that work here? But, I mean, at first it didn't look that good. But about middle, especially after the Kenyon Drake trade, I feel like the Cardinals hit their stride. Kyler Murray showed good progression throughout the season. He looks like a guy who looks like he belongs. Also, Arizona, even though they lost games, people considered them a team that they were fun. They were the funnest team that you knew was going to lose, because you knew they were going to put on a show and you knew their games were going to be highly exciting and competitive. And like I said, they got Kenyon Drake, which was big because they found a guy, especially with David Johnson falling off. They found a guy who can make big plays. Kenyon Drake is a big play waiting to happen, can catch out of the backfield, can make big runs. He's a good running back. You have Kyler Murray, who short. People question his height coming out of college, but his arm talent is one of the best in the league. He has excellent arm talent. And he has shown people that with his arm talent, he can make every throw, and he can read defenses. Also, Kyler Murray is a great athlete. He can run. He can outrun you. He can beat a lot of people. So he's a double threat. Obviously, you still got Larry Fitzgerald there. They just got DeAndre Hopkins, which I think will very much open up their offense with DeAndre there. DeAndre might have some huge numbers this year in this offense. Defensively, like I said, offensive line and defense were their issues. They have to get the offensive line short up. They have to get better protection for Kyler Murray. Obviously, an offensive line can really hinder. You don't want Kyler Murray, even though he can run, you don't want him running for his life. There's a difference even with quarterbacks who are mobile. Yeah, they have the ability to make plays with it, but at the same time, you still don't want them having to take hits. Kyler Murray, though, some people wonder if his body's fit for it because he does have like a short but compact kind of body. Like a lot of people like to say his running style, he runs like a fifth grader when he runs. But, you know, people like to talk about his play style. And Kyler Murray would like to sit in the pocket and only run if he has to. Defensively, like I said, they need to make adjustments. They need to make changes. They've done things this offseason. Obviously, they haven't been huge spenders. They've tried to make conscious trades. I'm obviously thinking they're probably trying to build through the draft. You know, they're trying to do things that work well. And, you know, you'll have to see. Obviously, they're going to probably look at a offensive lineman in the first round, I would think. That would probably be your best selection for you moving forward. Obviously, like I said, their big deal was getting DeAndre Hopkins. And, you know, offensive line is the biggest issue. So they need to get that filled. They need to get that satisfied by anybody. You know, like I said, they really haven't made too many moves. They signed Jordan Phillips. Good defensive tackle from Buffalo. Helped shore up the middle of that defensive line. Devin Kennard, very good linebacker from the Giants. A guy who's going to help in the linebacking core. A guy who's solid. Also, Marcus Gilbert, another offensive lineman, help add depth, potentially could start. They also went and signed linebacker from the Falcons, DeAndre Campbell. And running back Kenyon Drake signed the transition tag. I like their moves from DeAndre Campbell and Devin Kennard because they got their linebacker position pretty much solidified. DeAndre Campbell is a very good linebacker. I've seen him in Atlanta for the last few years. Good cover linebacker, good in the run. He wasn't the best out of Deion Jones of him, but he's a very good, solid starting linebacker. And remember, he's only on a 1-year deal. Not a lot of money. So, you know, we'll have to see. Obviously, Devin Kennard, 5-year deal. Sorry, 3-year deal. I've been saying 5, my bad. 3-year deal. And he can play. You know, that's about $6.5 million a year. And, you know, they got their starting linebackers on cheap. And like I said, Jordan Phillips on the defensive line can help plug up the middle of that defense. They've made a lot of good moves defensively this offseason. And like I said, they're going to continue to make those moves through the draft. And if they get their offensive line solidified, their offense could be one of the best in the NFL next year. They have all the capability in the world of being one of the best offenses in this league. And with the division that they're in, which is considered one of the top divisions in football, they're going to have to do something great. And if offensively seems like that, every division in this division offensively is great. Only difference is Cardinals are the only team in this division that defensively aren't great. The Rams have a great defense. Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey. They have guys. 49ers, we know what their defense did last year. You know how good they are from a defensive perspective because they go out there every day. Seattle, getting better on defense. Cardinals right now have the worst defense in their division. And if they want to be able to beat Russell Wilson's, Jared Goff's, and Jimmy Garoppolo's, you got to do it. I mean, people might sit here and argue with you. Kyler Murray is the second best quarterback in this division. So, if that is the case, that's even more important that your defense is up to par. I think Arizona is going to make a lot of smart moves if they're going to do what they need to do. Because if they don't, they could put themselves in position to go through some struggle, to go through some grind that they may not want to particularly go through. And if that happens, that could obviously create an issue moving forward going into the future. So, I think, honestly, with what I've seen with the team, there's a lot of good potential here. There's a lot of good chances here. And the Cardinals are, like I said, are my wild card team because I feel like they have the potential to be a team that could shock the world. Not shock the world. They'll shock some people, make the playoffs, maybe finish second in the division, or they'll end up having another so-so, maybe miss the playoffs type of division. And, either way, I wouldn't view either way of the season as a failure. The only way I would view it as a failure is if they had another season like they had this year. Because then it's just like, okay, something didn't work out, something went astray, maybe coaching isn't great, stuff like that. But I do expect this year to be a move up and improvement in record, talent, coaching, play, everything. Because they have pieces in place to be very, very successful. The biggest and hardest thing to do in this league is put it all together so then everybody can now have a piece of that pie. And everybody can now all be happy. Because when you win, it solves issues. And them winning will show the Arizona Cardinals could be back where they were with Bruce Arians, with Carson Palmer, which is a constant winner in the division and a playoff team every year with the talent they have assimilated on this team. And that was your Arizona Cardinals season in review. Next segment, we're going to get into the Chicago Bears season review. We're going to talk about Mitchell Trubisky and all of those issues in Chicago and their season outlook and review of their previous season right here on the podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we broke down the season of the Arizona Cardinals, what they did in free agency, what their outlook is on the new season. I always call them my wild card of next year's NFL season. They have the team to really be a good playoff team next year or just miss the playoffs. Either one. So we'll have to see. And I expect their offense to be one of the best offenses in the NFL next year. Because they have all the offensive potential in the world to be one of the best offenses in the league next year. So there's absolutely no reason why they couldn't be able to actually be one of the best offenses with the talent that they have. Kyler Murray come back to his second year, we're seeking to be even better than what he was his first year, with potentially an improved offensive line and Kenyon Drake back for a full year. It feels like there's a lot of things trending upward in Arizona with Kingsbury and that staff. But now, we're going to get to our next team, the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears are a team that have disappointed people. People felt like they could be better. They still had a top 10 defense. Their defense has been dominant the last 2 years. But they weren't as good as they were the previous year. But still good. Still a championship defense. What really let them down this year was the offense. Matt Nagy's tricks and everything was great the first year, which is what helped them get to the playoffs and cover up deficiencies. But obviously a second year and people know that offense, you can't really out-scheme people or out-game plan. You just got to have the guys. And it really showed in the quarterback position this year in Chicago. Mitchell Trubisky just did not perform up to par. It started from week 1 against Green Bay. I watched that game. He looked terrible. He looked like he was late on everything. He just didn't look like he was ready. And it was crazy because I remember in that report in that game they were talking about he looked so much better preseason, training camp. He looked like he improved. And then seeing how he's playing on the field, it's like, well, where'd that improvement go? A lot of people have hopped off the Mitchell Trubisky bandwagon. A lot of people feel like it's time to move on. They feel like it's clear he's not the guy, and he's not going to be the guy. So obviously a lot of people were ready for him to move on. So one of the biggest questions coming into this offseason was, what were the Bears going to do at quarterback? Well, they traded for Nick Foles. A lot of people had a very mixed reaction to this trade because they felt like they could have got a quarterback coming from Carolina for cheaper and felt like he was going to be the better player than Nick Foles. But Nick Foles can play. It's just you have to have a certain team around him to be in a certain system for him to be successful. If Chicago feels like they can give that to him, then he has absolutely a great chance to be successful where he is. And if not, then obviously we'll get another quarterback dilemma, quarterback season of just wrap around and differentials and everything like that. So if you look at the team and you look at everything that you see on paper, one of the biggest deficiencies also with this team was late game execution. I think when you have a quarterback that you don't have confidence in, it can affect your entire offensive game plan. Because it's like you don't want to throw it too much because you feel like he can't win you that way. But then it's just like in this league where you want to make big plays and your offense may have been struggling, what's the quickest way to make a big play? Through the pass. So you sometimes forget about the running game. The Bears have some guys. They had David Montgomery who came onto the scene, and they still have Tariq Cohen. So they have guys. It's just they have to make some projections. Wide receivers, they don't have anybody who's absolutely dominant, but they have good wide receivers. And they have a pretty decent offensive line. It's just a matter of Mitchell Trubisky playing better. I do also feel like from watching Chicago, Mitchell Trubisky is a mobile quarterback. He's somewhat of an athlete. I feel like they should have used him more in a running capacity. But I can understand you don't want to hurt your quarterback. Nick Foles, I feel like, was interesting because of the fact that he kind of Joe Flacco to me in this way. He has a spot in that pocket, and he's going to sit on it. And if your offensive line can't hold up, a lot of sacks will come from Nick Foles being that sitting duck because he is not a very good athlete. So if Chicago's offensive line is up to the challenge, if you give Nick Foles time, he showed he can pick some defenses apart. If you don't give him time, and then you'll start to see what you saw in Jacksonville last year. And also, he has also been very fragile throughout his career also. So injuries are likely too. I've been on the record saying that I believe this could be a quarterback carousel this season. Because neither one of these quarterbacks are a player you think, from week 1 to week 17, they can play every game. You feel like they're going to have their ups and they're going to have your downs. That's the issue with sometimes having two quarterbacks that can play. It's because before, if a quarterback struggles for like a 4 or 5 week stretch and you know you don't have another great quarterback, sometimes you're just kind of like, we got to ride this ship. But when you have a guy like Nick Foles, if he struggles for 2 games, we're pulling him. If Nick Foles struggles for 2 games, we're pulling him back out. So it could be a very controversial, very stressful time for teams, or Chicago in this case, to make that move. Now, in terms of offseason moves, they've signed Assembly, one of the best guards in the free agency class this year. They signed him. That was big to help out in the guard position. They signed Robert Quinn to a huge 5-year, $70 million deal. Some people think they may have overpaid for him. But they're expecting Robert Quinn to come in besides Mac and dominate and be the 2 bookends that you have to fear every Sunday and know they could ruin our game plan. They also signed Danny Trevathan, a very good linebacker, help man the linebacking core. Jermaine Ifedi, also very good player, can man it. Devin Bush, also another good player. He can play. Artie Burns, secondary player, he can play. Jimmy Graham also was another good deal, signing Jimmy Graham. And basically, the Chicago Bears, they have the potential to be a good team and make the playoffs. Their division is winnable. The Packers, we've talked about them. They're not the greatest team on paper. even though they have 13 wins. Minnesota, we feel like Kirk Cousins holds them back. Detroit is Detroit. So Chicago has a good chance to be very successful in this division, be a good team, and make the playoffs. It's not one of those divisions where it's like they have to have everything go well for them to make it. They could have maybe, because think about it, I'm not saying Kirk Cousins have never played well, but Minnesota's able to usually make it the playoffs every year with Kirk Cousins. Unless a big injury happens, and that could just limit them. Chicago could be just as successful too. So, it's going to be very important for whoever comes into it to come out there, compete at a high level, play well, and do their thing. Chicago this season is under a lot of pressure. If the Mitchell Trubisky situation does not work, Matt Nagy could be fired. I think we're entering that territory where if he don't work, then we're firing you. Unless the Bears brass is like, well, hold on. Mitchell Trubisky was inherited. He didn't say he wanted Mitchell. So maybe we should give him a chance to break in his own guy, which is maybe why Nick Foles is here. Maybe Matt Nagy feels like he can work with a guy with Nick Foles. It says I can get the best out of Nick Foles, so if you give me him, he'll be great competition for Mitchell, and also I have a guy I feel like I could definitely work with and get the best out of him. Because defensively, I expect Chicago to still be a top 10 defense this year, play well, and do what they got to do. But offensively will determine the success of this season. It will determine how good they do this season, if they're going to actually end up being successful long term moving in to future potential playoff hopes that they have for this team. So clearly that's going to be something that Chicago Bears fans are going to be keeping a watch out for, to see how their team does this year, to see how the progression of the team does this year, and going from there. So, but coming up next, we're going to talk about the Carolina Panthers. Yes, the Carolina Panthers season in review. A lot of big changes happening in Carolina. You can hear about all that more in here, right here on the podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the Chicago Bears season in review. We discussed, obviously, the quarterback situation, which is obviously the big situation in Chicago, with Mitchell Trubisky trying to figure out what to do with him, trying to figure out what's best for him, and bringing in Nick Foles to give him competition. Obviously, I feel like the Bears are going to have a quarterback carousel this offseason. And, you know, I think that's the biggest issue there. It's one of the hardest things, too, for Bears fans, because you don't know what your team's going to look like. You don't. You really don't. And all you could do is just hope for the best and just hope things get better. And we'll have to see if it actually ends up getting better. So, you know, we'll have to really, really see what goes on and what happens during that situation. We just got to come in there and, you know, hopefully the Bears can figure things out and they can contribute at the end of the day. Have a good season. But now we're going to talk about the Carolina Panthers. Obviously, the Panthers season from the get-go was trash. Okay, not trash. It was disappointing. It was disappointing because, you know, Cam came back, right? Preseason. He hurt his foot. That's what was the beginning of the end for this season. Tried to play a couple of games regular season. just did not look good. Offense looked lethargic, could not move the ball, could not score. And it was very evident in the Thursday night game between Tampa Bay, where both quarterbacks did not look good, but Cam still couldn't. It's just what we expect and seeing out of Cam. We just figured why does he struggle with it, And it was just seeing him, it just like he clearly was hurt. Something was affecting him. And eventually they decided to make the move. They moved to Kyle Allen, and Cam was out for the rest of the season with surgery. They tried to make it a week-to-week thing, but eventually they gave him surgery later in the season. And that was the end of Cam's season. So Kyle Allen came in. They actually had an initial spark. I believe they were 5-2. I believe. They had a good record with Kyle Allen at first, but then Kyle Allen started to fall off. And then they started to lose and lose and lose and lose and lose. Kyle Allen started to throw more picks and picks and picks and picks and picks. And basically, once it got to a certain point in the season where they were, I wanted to say they were 500 or below 500, they went ahead and fired head coach Ron Rivera. And then was found out that the owner had given Ron Rivera a certain number of wins he had to reach to keep his job this year. And he, I guess, with that last loss, that would have put him out of range to hit that win total, and I guess they felt like it was best to go ahead and cut the tie right now. And obviously, a lot of team players respected and loved Ron Rivera, Riverboat Ron, and obviously they weren't really happy about it. And you even see it for a couple of games after that. They seem very uninspired to play. I think when you have a respected coach like Ron Rivera, players, even if they struggle, they don't feel like it's his fault. They feel like it's their fault. So if you make the replacement, make the change, they still kind of feel like, oh, I don't really like this. I don't really like this. Doesn't make me happy that you make this change. It's one of those types of things. So I think that's one of the things that really happens. And it's one of the things that sometimes can be frustrating to look at. And I think it's one of those things that you just have to see about. Obviously, if it pays off. So obviously, the end of the season, losing record. And, literally the only thing that you could say they positively had was Christian McCaffrey. He had a breakout season. DJ Moore played well. They have some guys on offense. They lost, but the biggest offseason hit. They lost Greg Olsen. They lost Luke Kuechly to retirement. They lost Thomas Davis in free agency. Cam Newton, they're going to trade him, which they eventually ended up cutting him. Obviously, they hired head coach Matt Rule to come in and run the ship from Baylor. A guy who some people were surprised. They gave him a lot of money. I believe almost $10 million a year to be the head coach. That's a lot of money for a guy who's coming out of college. But they feel like what he represents and what he brings to the table is what the franchise needs, and he'll put them in the best position to be successful moving forward. So it's going to be one of those types of situations and one of those types of deals. The Panthers really, in this division, they look like the team who's not going to be the good team, quote unquote, for a couple of years, but they have made some moves. Matt Rule is going to, like I said, try to establish a culture that he feels like will get them to be able to be at the highest level and to be able to play well. Obviously, like I said, a lot of people were very surprised at the Cam situation, but they brought in Teddy Bridgewater. So obviously, with Teddy being brought in, that will be the guy who will be the new starting quarterback moving forward with the Carolina Panthers 3-year deal. So that's going to be very interesting to me to see, because I think it'll be interesting. Listen, they've made a lot of moves this offseason. They signed Robbie Anderson, deep threat wide receiver. A guy who can open up the field. A guy who young and fast. Gives Teddy Bridgewater, even though he's not known as a deep threat quarterback in terms of throwing it deep, he can get the ball to him. Trey Boston, been there, played well. He can play man the secondary. Teddy, obviously quarterback. They also signed PJ Walker, my XFL MVP, my favorite quarterback in the XFL. Guy I think he can play. Definitely, I think they brought him in to be the backup quarterback for sure. They also got Farrell Cooper. They brought him in. He came from the Rams. Obviously, it'll be interesting what happens with him. Obviously, Seth Duvall, Russell Okung. That's when they traded their Pro Bowl guard for a Pro Bowl tackle. They brought in John Miller, also another offensive lineman. Stephen Weatherly, a defensive end, to help out with the pass rush. Tamir Whitehead, a guy who's been in Detroit for the last few years, can play pretty well, play also in Oakland. And Steph Roberts, wide receiver. So they made a lot of moves. But as you can tell by a lot of these moves are not big moves. They didn't sound like big. They sounded like a lot of, I guess, second, third tier players. Just guys who are solid, can play, and do their thing. And, you know, obviously, like I said, they have a lot more moves they have to make to get this team complete. One thing I think you want to do, even though you have Christian McCaffrey, is you don't want to wear him out. You want to give your offense a dynamic look. You know, obviously, you know, DJ Moore is expected to make another jump as their number one receiver this year. You know, the Curtis Samuel is supposed to get better. They have their offensive line they're trying to get back and ready and fixed again. There's a lot of things going on right now where, you know, Matt Rule has to figure out what is going to be the identity of this team. What are we going to hang our hat on? With Teddy Bridgewater, you're going to have what they kind of had in New Orleans, which was kind of a pop gun offense. You get maybe one or two big plays a game, and everything else is going to be underneath, corner, a lot of progression readings, just finding open man, methodically moving the ball. Obviously, you have a big play guy in Christian McCaffrey who can make a big play for you. Like I said, Robbie Anderson was good because I think he's kind of like, I'm not saying he's the Ted Ginn with the Saints, but he's a guy, yeah, we're going to go say, hey, go deep, make a big play for us. Teddy can get it to him. Things like that. And, you know, the Panthers, listen, a lot of people I think don't expect them to do too much, but they do want to see how this team plays, you know, during the season, see what type of fight they put up, see how Teddy does. Because Teddy, this is big for Teddy, because remember, he's only a 3-year deal. So if he plays well, he will either continue to be the starting quarterback of the Panthers, or he will be a starting quarterback somewhere else, even after this deal is over. Because I believe when this deal is over, he'll be 32. So I think it puts him in good position to be good overall. Obviously, they have a first-round draft pick coming up. Some people think they should trade back. They might stay where they are. Obviously, they might look on the secondary ever since they lost Bradbury. They might try to fill the corner spot with a guy, or they might try to fill one of the safety spots, or a linebacker. I feel like first-round pick will definitely be on defense. Obviously, losing 2 of your starting linebackers for the last few years, losing your best corner, you would think that is definitely where they would go in the draft to fulfill those holes, so they don't have those openings. Obviously, like I said, they signed Tamir Whitehead, but that was just to fill, I think, the Thomas Davis role. They defined the next Luke Kuechly, or somebody who can play well enough to fill that role that Luke Kuechly has left into the hole of their defense. And, you know, they're going to have to just go from there and just improve as a team. So that's going to be the big thing for them going forward. Obviously, Matt Rule says he signed to a big deal, might have more leeway, might not have as much leeway. We'll have to see what happens. We'll have to see what happens in his first year in Carolina as he tries to get this team back to prominence. But that was the Carolina Panthers season in review. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the St. Louis Rams. I mean, not the St. Louis Rams, the LA Rams. See, sometimes you still get confused with that name. The LA Rams season in review right here.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about Carolina Panthers season. We talked about obviously moving on from Cam Newton, bringing in Teddy Bridgewater. That change. We talked about obviously you have Christian McCaffrey as a weapon, but you don't want to overuse him. We also talked about just, how Matt Rule is trying to simulate this team. They've made a lot of changes on the roster already. Obviously, I think they're going to go first round on defense because they still need to fill the Luke Kuechly role and might need to also find another corner. And they have a lot of, they do have a lot of things going on right now. They're trying to figure out what's best for the Carolina Panthers moving forward, as obviously they are not projected to be the best team in this division, but we don't know till the season actually gets here. But that's the projection right now. We'll have to see. They've made some good moves, nothing crazy, a lot of low-key signings, but good enough players to make some things happen. So it'll be interesting to see what the Carolina Panthers do coming into this next coming season. Now we're going to talk about the LA Rams. The LA Rams obviously making it to the Super Bowl about 2 years ago, being very disappointed. Oh, actually a year ago, really. You could say a year ago made the Super Bowl. Obviously being very disappointed now because they went 9-7, I believe. 9-7, 8-8. And there was a lot of issues throughout the season. Yeah, obviously Sean McVay is a great offensive line. Offensively, they were still a good team, but it wasn't the same like it was before. Obviously, with Todd Gurley not being the same player, you saw a difference in the offense. It was not as explosive. It was not as efficient. Jared Goff didn't look as good. There were too many games that they were asking Jared Goff to throw it 50-plus times because they didn't have a running game really to speak of. And offensive line was getting older, so they were eroding a little bit. Defensively, they still had a decent defense. They traded for Jalen Ramsey to help improve on the back end with Aaron Donald inside. So they have two key core defensive players, top players at their positions. So defensively, I think the Rams will be fine coming forward. But offensively, even though you would think that's not the biggest issue because they have Sean McVay, I believe that is their biggest issue. Because you have to figure out what is your offense. How can we be most effective? The Rams obviously let go of Todd Gurley. And they have to find something that can replace him. Obviously, Jared Goff is one of those quarterbacks, which you would think with any quarterback, you need a running game to help him, but you've seen him at his best with a running game, which I think is why people say that. So, obviously, with that being known and said, it's one of those things where Sean McVay has a lot of thinking to do. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen, but they have a lot of thinking they got to do. Now, they did put Brandon Cooks on the trade block, which is interesting. Brandon Cooks is not a bad receiver, which is actually interesting, but for some reason, I think a lot of guys are, I guess, feeling like we need to make some trades. We need to improve some things, and sometimes somebody always has to be the guy, and I guess Brandon Cooks is a guy because he's a good receiver, but you don't feel like he's a good enough receiver to sit here and just depict your entire team to them. But again, it really just depends on what you think, what you think is new, what is correct for you, and etc. They were able to sign Michael Proctor's back after he looked like he was going to go to Baltimore. But they got him back after that deal fell through. He was a key defensive lineman with Aaron Donald. Him in the paint, best two defensive tackle duo in the league. No doubt. They're an interior presence to be dealt with. But they did lose Nicole Roby-Coleman. Obviously, been one of their top corners. Obviously, he was a part of the infamous pass interference no call in the New Orleans NFC Championship game. Obviously, they have to replace that and get that back going again. Obviously they released a new logo, which got a lot of attention. A lot of people hated it. Some people liked it. Some people thought it was okay, but a lot of people were roasting it, making memes of it. It's funny, laughing at it. Obviously, I've noticed a lot of teams are going through a lot of uniform changes and a lot of logo changes. Well, Rams are really the only team I know that's going through logo change. The uniform changes, really. And it looks like the uniform, obviously, with the new branding of the team, since they're now in LA, they're trying to brand it differently. And right now, what they're saying is it's not really working out when it comes to that. So, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. You know, like I said, moving forward. But, you know, like I said, team-wise, they have a good team. They just have to, their young players have to step up. That's one of the biggest things. Their young players have to step up. Because if they don't, this team, like I said, is getting older. So, if they don't get their young players to step up, that could result in bad results for the team moving forward and make them not be a team that you should be worried about next year in the NFC West, especially with the division getting tougher. You gotta kind of be on your T's and Q's. You always want to feel like you got better after an offseason. You never want to feel like you got worse. They re-signed Andrew Whitworth, their tackle. You know, older guy, still a steady pass blocker, but he was also one of the most penalized players in the league last year. He's even lost a step, some people would say. So some people think, should you have brought him back? He's a little older. Does he have a season left in him? Would it be a good move? You know, obviously, like I said, the offensive line looked like it was deteriorating last year, so this might have not been the greatest move. They have let guys like Dante Fowler, Corey Littleton, Michael Brockers, even though he was able to come back, Clay Matthews and Nikhil Roby leave. And, you know, bringing back Andrew Whitworth, it's like you couldn't bring back one of them, but you brought back him. You know, so I think that's something I think concerns some people. I think some people are very unsure what to think, you know, of the team. Because like I said, offensively is where the biggest issues are. Offensively is where people are going to have their questions. I don't think it's going to be defense. Because you don't know what's going to look with Jared Goff. You don't know how it's going to look overall. You don't know how it's going to look when it gets down to it. There's a lot of what ifs. There's a lot of I don't knows. There's a lot of we'll have to sees. I mean, that's literally how it is. You want to think they're going to get better, but what if they don't? What if they don't get better? That's kind of the big thing. Like I said. Now, obviously, with Andrew Whitworth, they've also signed a Sean Robinson, good defensive tackle. They also brought in Leonard Floyd and a center. So, like I said, defensively, you can tell the defensive line is going to be one of the best in the league. I expect the Rams to be one of the top defensive lines in the NFL. But the thing is, they lost too many guys. Remember, Littleton, Fowler, Whittle, Gurley, Matthews, Coleman. They were tight against the cap going into the offseason, which is understandable when you think about it. Because they put a lot of money in these players, and that's why I feel like they're trying to look maybe into trading a Brandon Cooks. Free up some salary, but also get something in return. But the key to next season is going to be offensively and Jared Goff. Can Sean McVay figure out how to get the best out of this offense? Can he get the best out of Jared Goff? Can they find a running game? If they can figure all three of those out, and obviously the offensive line can protect and don't erode, the Rams have all the talent to be a competitive team. Because think about it, if they had manipulated that playoff thing last year, they would have made it to the playoffs last year still. People don't realize that. If they had went ahead and made that playoff, added that extra team last year, the Rams would have made the playoffs. So they have the talent to compete, but are they good enough? That is the question to do anything once they get there. And are they good enough this year after losing so many players to get back there? That's a big question. The Rams could end up being the worst team in this division. They really could. They could be at the bottom of the barrel. And that's going to put Sean McVay on the hot seat. Might even get him fired. Just depends on the expectations for the team. So, all of that is a question. All of that is something that obviously you don't want to happen. And you hope that, you figure out the answers to these questions when they're needed. But, we'll have to see what Sean McVay figures out and can he get this team back to where they want to get to, which is the Super Bowl 2 years ago. But coming up next, we're going to talk about the Super Bowl runner-up San Francisco 49ers season in review right here on the podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment we talked about the LA Rams. Obviously the Rams last season, disappointing season, did not reach the expectations that they had expected to reach. Played well though, just were able to get it done at the end of the day. Trying to bounce back this year, obviously. Trying to be better this year. So, obviously Goff, people have the jury out on him. People think he didn't deserve that contract. A lot of people felt like the Rams have made some not so great financial decisions, which is why they've been so tied to the cap. And it's just one of those things, that kind of just makes a situation kind of very iffy in Los Angeles as they're trying to market and become this new team and get some type of fan support. Because there's no guarantee that they may necessarily get that. So, but now we're going to talk about the Super Bowl runner-up, San Francisco 49ers. San Francisco, last year, a team that made it to the Super Bowl last year. Came out the woodworks. Kyle Shanahan put together one of the best teams in San Francisco history. Defensively, one of the best defensive teams, one of the greatest defensive lines in 49ers history. A lot of veteran leadership, a lot of talent. Offensively, Jimmy Garoppolo leading the show. 3 running backs, Mozart, Breida, Tevin Coleman. Young receivers. George Kittle, one of the best tight ends in the league. Just a lot of things happening with the San Francisco 49ers last year. And, they were able to win it all the way to the Super Bowl until they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl, losing a 10-point lead in the last quarter of the game to lose. San Francisco is one of the teams that came out of the Super Bowl having a lot of questions. First biggest question was, is Jimmy Garoppolo really the answer? I think when you think about that question, people feel like throughout this season there were times where it felt like Jimmy Garoppolo on offense was the liability. Is he really that elite? Jimmy Garoppolo has had some good games, but he's had some so-so games or games that you feel like, oh, he could have showed more. I feel like we can't really make a determination like that until we see him his second, third year going forward. Because this was his first full year as the starting quarterback. And listen, as much as you may try to sit here and say, oh, Jimmy Garoppolo did not have much to do with it, without Jimmy Garoppolo, they wouldn't have made the Super Bowl. In my opinion, I truly believe that. I don't think they would have made the Super Bowl. Because you got to think about all the games that they went through. Think about that Saints shootout. You think without Jimmy Garoppolo, they would have won that Saints shootout? Jimmy Garoppolo had to make some key throws in that game to win. I used to sometimes say, it kind of sucks being a quarterback who has a jury out on you, but you have a great team around you. Because if the defense is elite, and the running back and the running game is elite, and the receivers are good, everything is set up for you to be successful. But the problem is, if you're a quarterback who has a jury out on you, people are going to use that as the excuse of if y'all have a great year, or if you have a good season. Well, it's what he has around him. But then it's like, it kind of kills the purpose. Like, would you want to put a lot of talent around any quarterback? It's like you think Peyton Manning would have had the seasons he had if he never had Marvin Harrison, and Reggie Wayne, and Marshall Faulk, and Adrian James, and Joseph Adai, and all them. Dallas Clark. You think they had the offensive side of the Colts was always stacked. And that's why Peyton was always in position to be one of the best offensive teams year after year. So I'm trying to figure out, just because Jimmy Garoppolo has a great team around him, why are you criticizing him? Remember, San Francisco had decent receivers, but they didn't have any great receivers. Emmanuel Sanders is a very good receiver. He's not a great receiver. Their receiving core is not a top 10 receiving core in this league. His best target is a tight end. And he made the most out of that for what the passing game wants. It's not like he's sitting here with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and not putting up numbers. If you gave him that type of receiving talent, then you could have an argument, okay, maybe he's not as good as we think. But if you see the receiving core he has and your best player is a tight end and you have an elite running game, why is that a bad thing that the running game got them to the playoffs, got them to the Super Bowl? They did what worked. The Packers were a finesse team. You run the ball down their throat. The Vikings, you would run the ball down their throat. And score with the running game to not have to make Jimmy Garoppolo throw it. Why is that? Why do we look at that as an indictment on Jimmy Garoppolo? We look at the Super Bowl and say, oh, he missed that wide open pass to Emmanuel Sanders. That justifies he's not good enough. If Brady missed that pass, we wouldn't say he's not great. Brady has missed plenty of throws that probably could have won a game for them. But we ain't taking away from him. So why is it now Garoppolo misses a throw? Now we're ready to say, yeah, he has to go. It's kind of a Jared Goff situation. Remember, Jared Goff had a lot of talent around him, made us a Super Bowl. The next year, he still put up decent numbers, but you knew he wasn't the same guy. Because you saw talent not as good. Offensive line eroding. Running back's not there. Still had the receivers. Still could throw the ball. Still could score. But it just wasn't the same. So think about this. So we'll be able to make a true determination if Jimmy Garoppolo can play once this season goes through and see how he does this year with whatever they put around him. Because remember, teams ain't just going to sit here and let the 49ers do what they did to him last year on the offensive side of the ball with the running game. Teams are going to try to sell out and say Jimmy Garoppolo beat us, so Jimmy Garoppolo's going to have chances to prove it to you. And listen, there may be a game where he doesn't play well. But as long as he has more games that he plays better than well, then what are we complaining about? This team is built to get back to the Super Bowl next year. They still have a great defense. They still have the running game. As long as they stay healthy and Kyle Shanahan stays a good offensive play calling, what's the issue? Now, obviously, Kyle Shanahan has to deal with his own demons because twice in Super Bowl situations, the teams that he's been on have let up comebacks. And people are talking about was his play calling was questionable. Was he being conservative? So obviously he's fighting that. But overall, Kyle Shanahan is a good team guy. You know, John Lynch and that staff and that front office has done a great job. Now, in terms of offseason moves, they re-signed Jimmy Ward, Ben Garland, which they actually ended up releasing just recently. Travis Benjamin to add a deep threat. And then they were able to bring back Eric Armstead. Usually with teams like Super Bowl teams, you don't really see them make too many moves because you already have so much talent. Unless you lose a lot of it, you're not really going to make too many moves. They did trade DeBoris Buckner to the Colts for a first-round pick, so they got a first-round pick. So now they can draft somebody to replace him or improve another side of the ball. The 49ers, I think, are set up for next year. Again, they're in a tough conference, so we'll have to see. Seattle's going to be better. Arizona's going to be better. Rams, if they can get some thinkers out, can be better. So the 49ers got to stay on top of their game. They still have one of the best defensive lines in the league. Think about losing a Pro Bowl defensive lineman and still being a top defensive line in the NFL. They have a lot of things going for them. A lot of potential, a lot of talent, a lot of things that can work well. It's just a matter of putting it all together for a second year in a row. Consistency. That's one thing New England's been better than anybody out these last 20 years, consistently. Every year, with Super Bowl loss, Super Bowl win, playoff loss, playoff win. Next year, you knew New England was going to be good, and they were good. And that's what it's going to have to be shown this year with the 49ers, to show that they're a good team and a good franchise, consistently continuing winning seasons. And I think they have all the capability in the world of doing that and coming out there and competing at the highest level. So, I see a very good chance for the 49ers to prove themselves this year and to get back to potentially another run at the Super Bowl championship that was eluded them this past year. But coming up next, not coming up next, that's the end of the show. Yeah, guys, so that's your GSMC football podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate you for tuning in, listening to us. Don't forget to follow us on social media and listen to all of our other podcasts. Thank you, and have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.